Hello and welcome to another Path of Exile patch overview. Today we'll be discussing the loot changes in patches 0.10.3c. Perhaps one of the most controversial aspects of Path of Exile is the loot system. While largely a free-for-all system, there is a brief period after an item is dropped where the item is reserved for a specific player. This acts as a nice little bit of a grace period for players to have a moment to actually get to and pick up some loot. The controversial bit about the loot system is when you take a piece of loot, assign it to a player for 1.6 seconds, and then put players at different distances away from the loot. A character using melee abilities will pretty much be on top of the enemies and near the loot. Someone using ranged attacks is going to be further away. Why should that player be at a disadvantage to collecting loot assigned to them just for simply being further away just due to the way they play their character? One of the changes today actually addresses that fairly well. First and foremost, however, we're going to cover some of the smaller changes with this patch. Probably the simplest and most straightforward change is that magic items no longer get assigned to a specific player. This means any item that drops that has a blue name, it's going to be free-for-all straight from the start. Anyone who gets to it can pick it up. And would say, wait, but I like my blue items. I want to get them and I want to pick them up and I want to do stuff with them. The problem is, when you kill a boss, there tends to be a ton of blue items that drop. Just in the course of playing, there tends to be a ton of blue items. They're common as all hell, and the majority of them end up getting left on the ground anyway. So is it a good thing or a bad thing? It could go either way, but for the most part, the items are irrelevant to most players anyway. Another change that actually ends up being fairly significant is the amount of time allocated items are reserved to a specific player before they become free-for-all. Prior to this patch, a player had 1.6 seconds to pick up items allocated to them before they became free-for-all. This time has been increased to 2.6 seconds. Both of these values do include a travel time modifier for players who are further away. You did receive a bonus of the time it would take you to run to the item, plus an additional 10% of that time added on to account for your distance to the item that dropped. But this base time change will be nice. It just gives you more time to see what's going on. If a bunch of items drop at the same time, it'll give you more time to pick up more of the items. And it'll just make it a little easier to actually get the good stuff that you want off the ground. If you're playing with a group of friends in a party, it's not too big of a deal. A lot of people will share around, spread the loot. Everyone gets everything fairly. In a pug, or with random people, you're pretty much going to be screwed out of your loot, because they're going to be sitting there spam-clicking the item, trying to grab it the second the timer wears out. I know personally, I've had 2 uniques and God knows how many rares and currency items taken that I didn't even realize were there quick enough to get to the items. So, that little bit of extra base time should help a lot in that regard. The last big change is just having players' names removed from items when they've dropped. This will have a pretty big effect, because currently, when an item drops that's reserved for a player, it'll say the item name, say like, Scroll of Wisdom, followed by the next row saying Zayden, which in my case would be my name. It would be reserved for me because I'm awesome and love Scrolls of Wisdom. There would also be a little countdown timer bar that would gradually count down, and other loot ninjas who really want that Scroll of Wisdom can sit there spam clicking, because they can obviously say, oh, well, he's all the way across over there, he's not here, well, I'm going to steal his Scroll of Wisdom. Or just take it, not necessarily steal it, and oh, he's not going to get there in time, well, someone else may grab it, so I may as well grab it. I'm not going to make this about the motivations of people picking up loot that was reserved for other people. But now, not only is the name line gone, you won't see the item, oh, the item is reserved for Zayden, there's also no countdown timer. This will have a couple different and interesting effects on the way loot ends up getting handled. For parties of like friends and such, it'll probably make things a little more difficult because they won't be able to tell who stuff actually dropped for. Now you're doing a map and there's items everywhere, you kill a boss, like 50 things drop at the same time. Sometimes you just don't have the time to grab everything. So, friends could say, oh yeah, that one dropped for you, that one dropped for you. You could remember quickly who dropped or what dropped for who. Without having the names, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to see who stuff dropped for, because suddenly everything is just going to be there, and then everything's going to be the same color, and it's just going to be all one big mess. There is also an advantage to all this, however. Not having the second line that disappears eventually makes it a lot easier to keep your loot organized. Previously, if you were trying to click an item to pick it up, and you clicked the second half of the line for the item, when that timer was up and your name disappeared, that bottom half of the item disappeared. So if you were clicking that bottom half, suddenly the item's gone and you're trying to move somewhere rather than pick up the item. That meant a lot of the times you actually ended up missing items because you were clicking the wrong part of the item name. So in that regard, it's a good change. So overall, these changes I think are a little bit for the better. That extra second on the loot timer is going to be a pretty big deal. It's going to make it a lot easier to get to and figure out what loot you've gotten after a fight's gone on. The name and timer removal. The timer removal isn't a huge deal. The name removal, it would be good if they stuck that someplace for players to see, if it was like on the item tooltip or something to that effect that pops up at the corner of the screen. That's still some useful information for various parties that a lot of players, I think, would like to see remain in the game in some form, even if it's not on the item tooltip. Thanks for watching the Path of Exile patch 0.10.3c patch overview. Feel free to comment, rate, and/or subscribe, and have a great day.